Before I start, I want to just thank my executive command staff for being up here and our city legal for being up here. Today at 1 p.m., the Austin Police Department held its what we call our disciplinary review hearing involving former police officer VonTrey Clark, ID 7204. And subsequent to that hearing, we have indefinitely suspended Officer VonTrey Clark from employment from the Austin Police Department. The department and the chain of command have unanimously decided to sustain several charges, administrative charges, against Officer VonTrey Clark, which include the following. This is in relation to the issues surrounding the Samantha Dean murder and the murder of an unborn child. We have sustained a violation of Austin Police Department Policy 110.4.4, organizational structure and responsibility, i.e. insubordination. Officer Clark was ordered to provide certain financial and telephonic records to investigators of the Austin Police Department and Internal Affairs Division, and he failed to completely provide the documents that he was ordered to provide. Furthermore, Officer Clark has absolutely refused to come in and speak with, most recently, an order he was given to come in and speak to Internal Affairs investigators. We have also sustained a violation of 900.3.3, prohibited associations. This administrative investigation has revealed that Officer Clark has knowingly, willingly, and has a sustained association with known felons and people believed to be involved in criminal activity, which is an absolute violation of departmental policy and expectations of this organization. Lastly, as of the 17th of this month, Officer Clark is considered by this department to be absent without leave, and therefore he has been sustained on a violation of 900.4.3, neglect of duty, absence without approved leave, or AWOL. On February 4th, On February 4th, 2015, at about 2 a.m., sadly, a young woman's life was taken and the life of her unborn child. When this department learned of that fact, we made it our top priority, once we learned that there was an association between Officer Clark and the victim in this case, we made it one of our top priorities to do everything we could within our power to cooperate, because this did not occur in our jurisdiction, to cooperate with the Bastrop County Sheriffs, the Department of Public Safety, Texas Rangers, and the Bastrop County District Attorney. We made our #1 priority to bring justice, and this continues to be our #1 priority, to bring justice to Samantha Dean, her unborn child, and Mr. and Mrs. Dean, who I have been in communication with in the past and spoke with earlier today, just a little while ago. My heart goes out to the Dean family, to Samantha's friends, her colleagues, those that loved her, including members of this department that were close to her and absolutely loved that young woman. Although we opened on February 5th, the very next day after her murder, we placed former officer, and I will from this point forward refer to him as Mr. VonTrey Clark. We placed him on restricted duty administrative leave, basically under house arrest, where he was remained at home. And we began an administrative investigation to determine his relationship with Miss Dean, any type of relationship with the unborn child, and any relationship or any involvement with suspects that may be involved with the death of Miss Dean. Having said that, although we began our administrative inquiry the very next day, our #1 priority is not this administrative investigation. Our #1 priority is to do everything we must do to protect the sanctity of the criminal investigation. And so we have been moving at a very methodical pace. Earlier this month, just within that last 10 days or so, last couple of weeks, last few weeks, the district attorneys and the criminal investigators' affidavits, criminal affidavits that were filed with the courts in relation to the murder of Miss Dean and her unborn child became public. A lot of information was provided to the public in those affidavits. Once the department saw that those affidavits were public, it relieved our concern in terms of moving forward with our administrative investigation, because obviously we aren't the ones putting stuff out there, and it's already a public document. And that's when we moved our administrative investigation into, I would say, an aggressive timeline to complete it. Last week, Mr. Clark was ordered to come into Internal Affairs, specifically last Saturday. He refused to acknowledge that order. He refused to come in. Officer Dean tried to file some FMLA, Family Leave Act type requests that were denied because he does not comply with the requirements of that law. He has been told under numerous means and numerous medians that he is not allowed to leave, and that he is to come in, and that he is considered to be AWOL because he is absent without leave. Last week, the department learned, actually earlier this week, the department learned that he had left the country. He is last known to have arrived in Jakarta, Indonesia, the city of Jakarta, Indonesia. It's a city of probably about 10 million people. It is a city in a country, or a city in a country that does not have an extradition treaty with the United States. Obviously, this always raises concerns with our department, but I'm convinced that at some point we will see Mr. Clark again within the borders of the United States. Again, the criminal investigation is ongoing, so I will not be commenting further on the criminal investigation, just to say that based on what I know, based on what's public, based on what you all read in the memorandum, the administrative memorandum that we have to file with civil service firing him and definitely suspending him, it paints a picture. It paints a picture. It makes me very angry. It paints a picture that makes me sad. And it paints a picture of betrayal. Betrayal to a profession, betrayal to an oath, betrayal to the law, and betrayal, I think, ultimately to the sanctity of life. And I think at some point we will see Mr. Clark back. I have told Mr. and Mrs. Dean that, again, my number one priority as a police chief is to bring those responsible for the death of that young woman with that beautiful smile and her unborn child, to bring them to justice. We will continue to do everything we can as an organization to assist our partners at the Department of Public Safety. And now that he's overseas, I can assure you that at some point, if not already, our federal partners will be involved in this ongoing investigation as it relates to the criminal piece, and we will do everything we can to assist in bringing that man ultimately back to justice. I will also say that I have sent a message to my men and women that the actions that are described in here and the underlying crime that started this investigation is not consistent with the collective excellence, commitment, professionalism, and I believe daily excellence of the men and women of this department. Unfortunately, we hire individuals that are part of the same race that we all come from. It's a human race. And this outcome, ultimately, whatever, if you read that affidavit, I think you all can form your own conclusions as to Mr. Clark's involvement in this. But unfortunately, there's a set of circumstances that led to the motive potentially in this case and led to these deaths, that whether or not the person wore the uniform, that you might have had the same outcome. And I would just hope that this community understand that these are the actions of an individual, not the actions of a police officer. These are the actions that were independent of this police department. And this police department and the men and women that we employ here that are dedicated to the service of this community are sickened, appalled, angered, and will continue to do everything we can to gain the trust, keep the trust that we already have, but more importantly, to bring this man back. I have one last final message. As you all know, thanks to the internet, that I'm sure Mr. Clark will find this press conference. I have a message to you. If you have any dignity, if you have any semblance of humanity left in you, Mr. Clark, get back on that plane and come back here to Austin. If you're innocent, prove it. come over here and face the music. With that, I'll open it up to any questions.
Why didn't he take his passport?
We don't have the authority to take his passport in administrative
What
investigation.
has been your communication between the APD and the Bastrop County Sheriff's Office regarding these administrative issues when you realized he was gone, that you put him on indefinite suspension or fired him?
Well, we just put him in the second that I learned last week, actually, guys, correct me, it was earlier this week.
Yes.
Time is flying. Earlier this week, we learned that he had gotten on a plane and left Tokyo, Japan. Excuse me, one question at a time. To Tokyo, Japan with the connecting flight to Jakarta. The very first thing I did is I picked up the phone. I called Brian Gertz, the Bastrop County attorney, and I implored him and urged him with everything that I can as a police chief. Again, it's not my jurisdiction, to do everything he could to ensure that we tried to stop him from going to a country without an extradition treaty. Now, I understand that even though there's not a treaty for extradition, that doesn't mean that somebody's scot-free, that at some point when he is charged, if he is charged by the Bastrop County Attorney's Office, there's still methodologies and methods and legal proceedings that can be secured to bring him back. But the world is not as big as Mr. Clark thinks, especially when his picture starts being disseminated around the world. That same sphere that we call the internet, that I'm sure he'll get to see this press conference, will also end up showing the rest of the world what he looks like. And I'm sure that somebody that is a personal interest in such a heinous crime, I'm not sure that the people of Jakarta, the people of Indonesia would want him in their midst, and I'm pretty certain that he'll be sticking out pretty quickly out there.
Early in the investigation, you guys had kept Officer Clark under 24-hour surveillance. Can you talk about when that dropped off, or how the decision
Well, I'm not
was
going to
made?
talk about the specifics on that, but we cannot have administratively somebody under complete surveillance. It's just not economically feasible. Unfortunately, we have an organization with some limits to our resources, and again, please keep in mind, we're not the lead agency on the criminal investigation. I've gotten calls about the affidavit from members of the media wanting me to comment on it, and I always say about that is this: the affidavit speaks for itself, and I would just say that based on what I've read in the affidavit, based on what I know, I don't really have much use for Mr. Clark right now.
What domestic airport did he depart from when, and what is the status on determining the father of the unborn child?
His point of exit was Dallas, DFW. That will be in the notice that that you all will release. It's a public document. Went from Dallas to Tokyo, Tokyo to Jakarta.
What day was that?
He departed on the 17th of July.
When he was filing for permission to leave to visit some sort of family matter, did he indicate he had family in Indonesia, or did
He did not ask for permission to go to Jakarta, Indonesia, and I can tell you that he wouldn't have been given permission to go to Jakarta, Indonesia. I mean, I was born, I came over from Cuba, but I'm not that naive. He would have never authorized him to go to Jakarta, Indonesia. He was not given permission. He knows he wasn't given permission. We have communicated that to him through all kinds of methods, that he does not have permission to be gone, asking for his whereabouts, and he's not communicating with us. So, no, do not believe for a minute. I don't know where you got that, but he does not have permission to be in Indonesia.
How long was he in Japan?
When it was conveyed to him, don't leave, was that like don't leave the city, the county, the state? What was the level of his ability?
It's been conveyed to him that he's AWOL. And we've been asking him, excuse me,
conveyed to him as to how far he, was too far to leave?
he can't go anywhere when you are in administrative restricted duty. You have to communicate for any type of, other than, you must tell the department where your residence is. You must remain in your residence during work hours, and if you're going to be going somewhere beyond that 40-hour work week, you have to notify the department.
What about parenthood of the unborn child? Where does that
He's admitted that he's the father.
When he thinks he's the father.
Well, I'm just telling you, he says he's a father.
But has there been any DNA?
That's going through the DA's office. I'm not going to speak about that. I can
When
tell
he
you that
asked-
he admitted he's the father. He believes he's the father, and that's part of the internal affairs package, and so that's public record.
When he requested time off for this family thing, did that, in any indication, give you all any indication that he was looking to leave the country, leave
No, there was nothing on there that I want to leave the country to go to Jakarta, Indonesia.
Do you
But
have any
I
idea
mean,
if he
with
had a
the families.
layover in Japan or if he was staying there for a couple
Yeah,
days?
and I'm not going to talk, his leave, he wanted a, FEMLA, it was a medical leave that he requested under the Family Medical Leave Act, and he was not authorized or eligible, better saying, based on the law departments and the HR department's review of his application last week.
What about his stay in Japan? Was it a connecting flight?
It was a
Did he have
connecting
layover?
flight,
Okay, so he had a layover, he didn't stay.
as far as we know, yep.
Chief, during the news conference, you've done everything except say that you think that he did it. Do you think that he killed her?
I'm not going to comment further. I can just say that the affidavit speaks for itself. And if you look at that, Pat Fowler, in that affidavit, there's a sworn affidavit by criminal investigators. I think it speaks for itself.
Have you talked to Chief Barnett?
No, I have not.
Have you talked to Samantha Dean's family?
Yes, I have. I already said that.
Do you feel like you've let them down, or the departments?
No, I don't feel like I've let them down. I've done everything within my power to investigate this. We're not the criminal investigators here, and quite frankly, the Dean family, they're pretty clear on where I stand on these issues.
We'll take one more question. Thank you.